watch
How?
this?
How?
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 How? Ew,
How do you watch this? Dude, I'm gonna pee my pants.
Hello, you're listening to How Do You Watch This, a movie review podcast where each week we give each other a movie to watch in the genre we love, but they don't.
Mm-hmm.
My name is Demi, and I love horror.
My name is Megan, and I love romance.
And this week, I had Megan watch the classic The Shining by Stanley Kubrick, not the TV miniseries.
There's a
That
miniseries?
is really awful. There is a miniseries,
And it's
which
bad?
I figured. Yeah, I
Oh, okay.
figured you would not be watching that
No.
accidentally, but after I realized, I was like, ooh, maybe I should let Megan know. But
What, you thought
Anyway,
that
no
I
one-
might have watched a TV series by accident on a
Like, 'cause
movie
it's like-
review podcast?
it's a movie,
Oh,
but it's like
okay.
split into, it's like the original It
I see.
series.
I see. Okay. Yeah.
Either way.
Okay, fair enough.
I was thinking too much on it. I was
Yeah.
like, oh no.
Could you
And I'm like,
imagine if I
no,
watched like 4 hours of freaking...
This was a long movie.
Right. Damn it, Demi. I mean, this movie already was long. It was like 2.5 hours.
It was long. When I was
Yeah.
rewatching it, I was like, God damn, I don't remember this movie being so long.
Yeah, we watched it over the course of 2 nights. We like stopped it and then picked it back up
Yeah.
again. We watched an hour and then we watched an hour and a half because it was just like, can't watch. I have a bedtime. I'm old.
Right.
So
That's what when I was rewatching, I was the same way. I'm like, all right, I'm gonna have to stop it here
Yeah.
and pick it back up because
Yeah.
it's too long.
yeah, I do wonder sometimes if that stops me from getting like really drawn into the scary bits of it, but I didn't find this movie that scary, which I'll go into. I think
Yeah.
anything with time, it's 44 years old at this point. I don't really
Yeah.
think it's going to be that scary,
Yeah.
which is why I called it a psychological horror, because I didn't find it to be a psychological thriller. Thriller would imply
Mhm.
that I was on the edge of my seat, and I wasn't.
Yeah.
I didn't really find, there was only a couple, like there was one time where I felt my heart rate picked up a smidge.
Yeah.
So I'll go into the heart rate picking up, and it's because I'm empathetic and I can put myself in people's shoes. So it was released in 1980, and it's definitely giving 1980 in a lot of good
Mhm.
ways. My snapshot, I'm going to go through. I got really tired of rereading my notes at one point, so I don't know if it's too detailed or not detailed enough.
Okay.
But we'll see. We'll see what happens.
See.
I'm gonna read it off, and then on the side column I have red flags for each person that I listed. So the hotel has red flags because honestly the hotel is a character.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Wendy, Jack has red flags. Obviously, no one's surprised there. Tony
Danny
has
the child.
Danny. I didn't write anything, but he does have red flags. But that's just because he's a weird little kid, creepy dude.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love how you list Tony.
Yeah, of course I listed Tony. All right. So, Jack Torrance, former school teacher and aspiring writer, is given the opportunity to become the winter caretaker of the Overlook Hotel. He is going to make the nearly 4-hour drive with his wife Wendy and their son Danny. Red flags are going up left and right, but it's hard to say if they relate to shady activity or to the bad parenting style specifically delegated to late 70s, early 80s. At the beginning, I was really like, there were moments where he was saying things, and I was wondering, is this just horrible parenting that everyone experienced at this time period, or is he just a horrible dad? I wasn't sure. Prior to even leaving for the hotel, Danny has an episode in which he goes catatonic and blacks out part of his memory. A doctor characterizes this as auto-hypnosis, basically saying he hypnotized himself and that this will probably never happen again. During this conversation that Wendy and the doctor are having, we learn that Danny has an imaginary friend named Tony, and when it was first mentioned, I thought Danny said, Tony is the lizard that lives in my mouth. But what he actually said is, Tony is the little boy that lives in my mouth
Yeah.
and crawls into my belly when he's trying to hide.
Mm.
Very interesting.
You just pictured a little lizard.
Yes, I did. I pictured a little lizard who was like, Red Rob.
Red. Yeah. Daddy.
And I'm going to talk about the little creepy voice he makes later because
Oh
I
my
have
God.
so much
It's
to say
iconic.
about it. It really is. that the imaginary friend Tony developed after an incident when Danny was taken out of school because he was injured from a dislocated shoulder that occurred when Jack accidentally pulled on his arm too hard. And this was when Jack was drunk. So this caused Jack to swear to sobriety, and he is 5 months sober at this point. On their first day at the hotel, the grounds chef, Hallinan, whatever.
Hallinan, I think.
Hallinan spends one-on-one time with Danny. It's at this point that we learn Danny actually has the Shining, an ability to speak with fellow sensitives telepathically, as well as notice supernatural events. Unfortunately, this is a dangerous skill to have when in an environment with such a storied past. Before he even goes to the hotel, Jack learns that there was a horrible tragedy that occurred at the hotel in which the former caretaker during the winter murdered his wife and twin daughters with axes. He just chopped them up into pieces, and that comes into play regularly throughout the movie. After the family has been there for about a month and they've fallen into a routine, it's revealed that Jack felt major deja vu the very first time he went into the hotel. He said it was almost like he had been there before, like he knew what was around every corner. Wendy, meanwhile, has to walk 1.5 miles, essentially, with a food cart to and from the kitchen because she is the sole caretaker and Jack is a child who sleeps until 11:30 in the morning.
Yeah. And sorry, he just writes, and I'm rewatching. I'm like, she's taking care of everything.
She does.
Hotel,
she does literally
everyone.
everything. Yes, she maintains the hotel. You see, at one point, she is genuinely the person doing all the maintenance work. This man is just playing with his ball and and typing. I couldn't. I was livid.
Yeah.
Danny is riding a bike around the hotel, which is a familiar scene I've definitely seen before. There were lots of things as I was watching where it was like, oh, I've seen that before. Oh, I've seen that before. And for the most part, I knew most of those scenes were from The Shining, but there were a couple that I didn't. Like, a snowstorm is projected to come in, and Wendy goes to tell Jack about it. Her interruption causes him to go into a fit of rage where he rips up everything he just wrote and says really unkind words to her. I have a quote. Okay. So he basically tells her to leave because she's distracting him, and he says, quote, "Why don't you start right now and get the fuck out of here," unquote. And I was
such a bitch.
First of all, he's doing things here and there where I'm like, don't like that, don't like that. This is the first time where you're like, oh, you're a massive asshole.
Yeah, you definitely suck. I'm like, his wife is so sweet.
So sweet.
And
Too
so caring.
Sweet, some may
I'm like,
say.
how dare this piece of shit?
Yes. I couldn't believe it. She literally was she was like, oh, I'm gonna bring you food in a little bit. And he said, don't even bother me. If you hear typing, don't come in here. Rah, rah. Oh, it was so lame. We learned that the phone lines are down and the storm that's coming in is the worst they've had in years. Danny is having strange visions. He sees the twins getting murdered. It is very jarring the way that Stanley Kubrick has the scenes cut, where it's just you see the hallway and then it's dead bodies, and then the hallway and then dead bodies. So it is very interesting the way that he does that. Jack becomes increasingly more unpredictable. He's staring creepily out the window at the snow, and he weirdly hugs his son in this way that feels very non-consensual. Like, this poor kid is smushed up against Jack and does not look like he wants to be hugged, and Jack is just squeezing him. Jack's
being extra creepy at this point. Like, yeah, something's up with him. He's not normal. No.
It becomes obvious that Wendy is doing all the hard work around here, like we talked about. And she overhears Jack moaning and screaming. It turns out he had a dream where he killed Wendy and Danny by chopping them to pieces. At this point, Danny shows up with his neck red and sweater ripped. Wendy understandably thinks that Jack is the one who did it because there's only other people, there's only 3 of them in the hotel. And he's already accidentally dislocated his son's arm before, which I don't think necessarily implies he is a jerk. I think accidental dislocations happen all the time. So that was just kind of an interesting thing
Yeah, I mean, we can talk about his alcoholism.
Yes. Yeah.
Obviously an issue. But
Yes.
yeah, I don't know if he was super abusive to them
Right.
before. I think he definitely had anger issues and the
Yes.
alcoholism was really bad, but I
Yeah.
mean, we can talk more about him.
Okay. Jack lumbers around the hotel and seems to have his own visions. He sees a man named Lloyd, who's a bartender, asks him for a bourbon and drinks away his sobriety. This is when we learn that the incident that happened with Danny actually happened 3 years ago and not 5 months ago. Up until this point, I had believed it had happened recently
Mhm.
because the wife had said that Jack told her if he ever drinks again, she can leave him after the event with Danny when he went sober. So the fact that he's only 5 months sober is very interesting. He continues to act unhinged and calls his wife a quote sperm bank unquote. And
Ugh,
the way I wanted to
unreal.
throw the remote at the TV, I was so mad. uh, okay. Wendy runs to Jack and tells him there's a woman in the hotel who tried to strangle Danny. At this point, Jack goes on the hunt for her. In the room that Danny was in, sees this beautiful naked woman in a bathtub, and they just start making out randomly. And she turns into this horrifyingly decayed, drowned woman who starts cackling at him, and he runs out of the room. Also, Danny is clearly having visions of this. Poor kid does not deserve to see
Right.
that. So then Jack goes to Wendy and is like, there was nothing there. And he is surprisingly convincing. I will say that. When he was talking, I was like, I could see him being convincing. I could see where he could be manipulative that way.
Definitely.
The chef, Hallinan, is in Florida and gets a shining moment from Danny in which he sees some dark stuff happening. So he hops on a flight to Colorado. Danny is really struggling, and Wendy wants to take him to a doctor, but Jack freaks out about the idea of leaving the hotel. Jack has a vision in which he talks to the former caretaker, Grady, who he of the murdering fame. And Grady informs him he needs to take care of his problems. He says, quote, you've always been the caretaker. I've always been here. Or you've always been here. Sorry. You have always been the caretaker. You've always been here. Which, at this point in time, my brain, you know how I like to try to solve problems. Right. I was like, oh my God, he's Grady. He was the one who murdered. And then I realized that that's impossible if the caretaker killed himself afterwards. Like, he can't come back to life for like 10 years later. It happened in 1970. This is 1980. Yeah. It wouldn't have made sense. But for a second there, I was convinced. I was like, oh my God, he's back.
Connecting some dots. Yeah. I can see that.
Yeah. Then Grady and Jack proceed to use the N-word repeatedly.
Girl, I was like, oh, I don't remember this.
Dude, it was like a jump scare. It was like it was the hard R. I was like, yeah. I feel like I was under attack.
Ooh, like,
yes.
I know.
Literally, my notes app said capital letters, like N-word, 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 N-word. I was freaking out. I did not, I blacked out a little bit. It was so much. They said it like
I was like
5 times.
Yeah.
Multiple times. I couldn't believe it. Anyway, I feel like that is playing into this idea that will come into later about the continuity of timelines. I feel like the way that they're talking about that and the use of the hard R is playing into this like 1920s timeline that we'll talk about later. Yeah. But anyway, I super hated that. Wendy ends up finding the book that Jack has been writing, and it turns out it's entirely comprised of the quote, all work and no play makes Jack a dull boy. That was actually like kind of creepy. I was like, I put myself in her shoes, and I was like, oh.
Right. Can you imagine? It was like stacks of papers.
Stacks. Hundreds of it. Like, he has been clacking away for over a month at this point.
Yeah.
Day and night, writing. And there's, like, some paragraphs that are, like, indented. And, you know, there's just different formatting on them. And that's the only thing it says?
Yeah, I would have shit my pants. Like, honestly,
Yes.
I would have freaked out.
Yes.
And just being in the hotel is so huge. And it's just three of them to like try and find your son and escape. Like, the thought of
Yes.
it is just terrifying.
Yes. So scary. So every time I put myself in her shoes and I imagine myself as a woman with a big, strong man, like genuinely a big, strong man who is capable of hurting you, and you are trying to protect a child, like that's intimidating.
Yeah.
So Jack stumbles upon her and asks her how she likes the book, which
Oh my god.
What do you mean? She has Right. She has a bat in her hand. She's kind of really pathetically swinging it. She definitely gives off like Raggedy Ann doll vibes.
Yeah.
Like, just
poor thing.
Floppy arms. She just can't defend herself. But she does a decent enough job because she whacks him in the head and is able to drag him into the pantry in the kitchen. She wants to go to the Snow Cat to get Danny and escape, and then learns that not only has Jack sabotaged the radio, but he's also sabotaged their only means of escape. So they're all trapped at the hotel together. In one of the more supernatural twists in the movie, Grady manages to unlock the pantry door so that Jack can get out and kill his family. Danny moans red rum to Wendy, who is sleeping, and he writes it in lipstick on the door. When we see in the mirror, it's actually spelling murder, which we all are familiar at this point with the idea of red rum, but this I did not know came from The Shining.
Okay.
Interesting. I saw that and I was like, oh, this is where that comes from. I thought it was a different horror movie. I don't know. I thought it was more modern. I didn't realize it was that old.
Yeah.
But that was interesting for me. And then I said my most memorable scene was the red rum scene because Travis can't stop repeating it to me. Like all night. After we finished the movie, he was talking to me in the Tony voice.
Oh, no.
I kept trying to have a conversation. He'd be like, red rum. I was like, sir, knock it
I love
off.
the Tony voice. It's so funny.
It's so funny. At first, it really sounded auto-tuned. Like, he did not sound like a human being using that voice.
No.
And there were a couple times where it was really creepy. It was actually creepy sounding. And if my kid was making that noise, I would be considering locking them.
Dude. Too much, especially like being woken up to like red rum, and he's like screaming it. I would have
with a knife in his hand.
Yeah, and your husband acting crazy.
Yes,
done. I'd be done.
No, that would destroy me. I would not have the
I know. I would never be okay from this. This would be so traumatic.
The PTSD this poor woman experienced. So, because he has escaped the pantry, Jack comes to the hotel. Jack goes to their little apartment inside the hotel and starts axing the door open. So Wendy takes Danny into the bathroom and they hide as Johnny starts making his way in. And then we see the iconic "Here's Johnny" scene where he breaks a hole in the bathroom door and shoves his head through it. She, before this, manages to get Danny out the window, but she cannot fit out the window. The window will not open up high enough for her to get her body out. Danny is on his way to hide somewhere for safety, and she's in the corner watching as the axe is coming through the door. So my initial reaction as I'm watching this, she's screaming as the axe is going through the door. And my first thought was, oh my God, she's screaming. Who's going to hear her? Chill out, bro. And then I thought, okay, Megan, put yourself in her shoes. Imagine your husband, who you've been married to for at least as long as that child is alive, I'm assuming.
Yeah.
Who you've been married to for quite some time, has suddenly changed from being, whatever personality he was, to having an actual axe, slamming it through the door and knowing that he is about to kill you. Like, he is going to put that axe into your body and that's your future. That was the one time in the whole movie where I actually got afraid because I was like, oh, if you put yourself in her shoes, that's super scary.
Yeah, that's because not only is your son got out, but it's like if Jack kills her now, he can go after Danny next. Yes. So it's like that whole thought of like, I might not survive, my kid might not survive. Yeah. Like, it's just the worst.
Really scary.
I would have been fucking stabbing at the door.
Yes.
Like he put his face in. Bah, bah, bah.
Thank you.
Done.
Thank you. This is why my survival rating is quite higher. Because here's the thing.
I would have knocked his ass out
Yes.
quick.
I love my husband. Would never kill my husband. My husband tries to kill me. He comes at me with an axe. My self-defense is kicking in, buddy.
Especially if we had a kid involved. Oh my God.
Right.
Bro, anything. You're done.
Right.
You're out.
I'm not swinging that bat like it's a fly swatter. I am a baseball
a
Hall of
home run.
Famer. Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
No way.
Exactly.
You're gonna bash my brains in? Nuh-uh, buddy. Nuh-uh. And I get being afraid. But I think that fear would fuel my body.
Right.
And who knows? I am in fight or flight. I tend towards freeze. I do tend towards freeze. But I think that when you are in protective modes, whatever, like, I'm going in there.
Yeah, you're acting.
Right,
so.
right. She does do what she needs to do. She does slice his hand with the knife, and that distracts him enough. Would I have wanted her to be more aggressive? Yes. But to each their own. Every human being handles stress differently. People on the Titanic, some of them just stayed in their bedrooms. That was just who she was. So that's okay. But disagreements. Okay, so at this point, she slices his hand. They hear a snowmobile coming up, and it's the chef on his way to save the day. Unfortunately, he gets axed by Jack, and the narrative role the chef played was just to get the new snowmobile up there and to help kind of pull the story along. I want to talk about him more later. He proceeds, and by he I mean Jack, proceeds to chase Danny around the hedge maze that's in the back gardens. Danny is smart enough to trick Jack into running in circles, and Danny escapes the maze, running into Wendy's arms, and they drive away to safety on the new Snowcat. Jack freezes to death into the classic meme we all know and love of the frozen man in the snow. I actually did not know that was from The Shining.
Oh, okay.
And then we see a scene of the hotel, and they zoom in on an old photograph that shows Jack at the hotel in 1921. The end. Okay. Lots and lots and lots to talk about. Wow. When I saw this, I was like, everybody get ready for a 2-hour episode because...
in my head I was like, this is gonna be a longer one because
a
there's so much to talk about.
It's a lot. And that snapshot, I feel we're 24 minutes into recording right now. That snapshot was the shortest I could make it. It was, and I left a lot out. Okay. Let's put it all back in. The intro credits. I'm going all the way back.
With the creepy moaning song.
Was it a moaning song?
It was
I was so distracted by the font.
The font.
It was
awful.
Light blue, and it's going across the screen like this isn't like Star Wars speed. It wasn't nice and slow. It's like zipping up. Okay. I guess you don't care that anyone knows it's called The Shining. There was no like dramatic moment. It was just whatever. I just felt like it was giving 80s. So at the beginning, in his interview, both Jack and the interviewer are wearing knit ties. And I want to say, I like this. I think that should come back into play in modern times. I was into that. And I liked the carpet in the gold ballroom. Don't know if you were paying attention.
Yeah. The carpet in the ballroom. I do like the carpet in like the hallway.
Yeah.
It's just like very iconic type of.
Yes, it's a very distinctive pattern, which I liked for them. And I think that a good bold pattern is nice. Along with the other things in the gold ballroom, it was a little much. Yeah. I was like, we can bring the gold ballroom down a few notches. Like, it doesn't have to be that gold.
It is the gold ballroom, though.
And I love gold. Don't get me wrong. Yeah. I just felt, that was a little too much for me.
The whole vibe of the hotel is really cool.
Yes.
But the rooms were weird.
The rooms were very weird. I would not want to stay in there.
Yeah, especially 237, where the old woman was at. It was such a weird room. In the bathroom, I was like, oh.
Dude, the bathroom was funky as heck. That in your bathroom?
The whole thing is just like tiled, and it's just like,
Yes.
it's an old bathroom. I mean,
Right.
it's like in the 80s,
Yes.
but it's just like all the rooms were like really weird.
Very strange. They were like peacock. It was almost like peacocky, the color of the carpeting in there.
Yeah.
So it was definitely interesting. I personally couldn't imagine staying in that room. It was giving cheap motel honeymoon suite.
That's exactly what it feels like. Yeah, all the rooms felt like that. I don't know if because it's like 80s. Maybe like that was just
I think
the norm. And like seeing that now, it's just like, oh,
ooh, you're outdated. But back then, that probably was better.
Probably
The lobby, and I don't know if it was the lobby, but the seating area of the hotel with the really huge skylit, like the lighting and all the window walls. That's stunning. 10 out of 10. Love it.
So in the book, it's room 217, not 237. Not sure why it was changed. Either way, it's the same.
Maybe it flows better. 237, 217. It's not really that different.
Maybe. So Stephen King actually stayed at the hotel this is based on, the Stanley Hotel in Colorado, and he stayed in room 217. But basically, he got inspired because him and his partner were like the only ones at the hotel at the time because they were just going to close for winter.
Oh.
So he spent a lot of his time just like walking around this like quiet,
eerie.
basically abandoned hotel, and got the idea of The Shining from it. But yeah,
dude, could you imagine having the kind of mind that jumps to those places? What a nightmare to be on vacation and
I would scare myself so bad.
I know.
I can't. I love horror, but like I do freak myself out. And being in a hotel like that seems abandoned, just walking through hallways. No.
Not interested. That's scary. I like having the romance mind where I would imagine a meet cute between
right. Turn around
people.
The corner. It's like,
right.
oh,
hello, you're staying here too? Just us? I literally recently read a romance book of two people who were like the only guests in a hotel, and it was super cute. Way preferable experience.
Yeah, no. I mean, anywhere where it's just too quiet, it's just like creepy, and you're walking, you don't know what's around the corner. And in Danny's case, he turned around the corner.
You see some
twins.
Little
girls.
Twins.
Hell no.
Yeah,
nope.
He saw them way too often. And then they were talking to him in like double speak, and it was oh boy.
Come play with us, Danny.
Yeah, I wasn't expecting the little accent either.
Little Bridgerton bitches.
Right. Okay, so some red flags for the hotel. Obviously, we have the tragic past with Grady, the former caretaker. First of all, for me, I mean, it is a big hotel. I don't know. It would depend on the cleansing capabilities. Like, what have they done to cleanse the grounds of this tragic incident that would lead to me entering the grounds or not? Because that's a lot of negative energy. And even without The Shining, I don't want those vibes. Those are bad vibes.
Right. And one of the things they bring up, they're like, oh, this is built on an Indian burial ground.
Thank you. That was my next point. Located on an Indian burial ground.
Homie, what?
Excuse me? And then they talk about it like it was like a cool thing. And they're like, yeah, they had to defend it against the Indians or whatever. Okay.
Yeah. And then they have the audacity to like put like Native American artwork.
Thank you.
And stuff.
Thank you.
What?
Exactly.
What?
It was literally such a slap in the face. They just left, right, and center, could not control themselves. Oh my god. The hedge maze is as old as the hotel, which I don't know if that means anything, but it just felt interesting. It felt like an interesting point. And room 237, which you mentioned. Okay, those were the red flags for the hotel. I feel like for the most part, the hotel wasn't bad. Like, there were definitely weird things going on.
Yeah.
Especially weird was at the end. They suddenly started bringing in all these other interesting characters that Travis and I were like, what? At one point, it feels like it was out of nowhere. So out of nowhere, Wendy's running up the stairs trying to find Danny, and she looks over and she sees a butt hanging out of a furry suit, and then a man and a fuzzy like a dog bear thing look over at her. So that was weird. I don't even...
Yeah. So the one thing that's mentioned in the book, that has always confused people, obviously, because it's like, what does that mean? So it's Wendy's running. She sees a man in a bear costume. having sex basically with the former hotel manager. And in the book, it's, I guess, told that he had a secret homosexual relationship with a party guest dressed in a dog costume. That's the most in the book. So
Why
I
do they
don't
even
know.
put it in the movie?
I don't know. I watched this video and it was crazy. And they were talking about the potential of Jack, like, pretty much molested Danny at one point. And I don't know. They went like deep. They dug in deep.
Yeah.
So some of these theories take with a grain of salt. But they like brought up like points how like Danny's always seen with like a bear, like his bed had like a bear thing. So like that's kind of related, but I'm like, I don't know. I don't believe that. But that's a theory that some people think of too for the movie.
Okay. I would be interested to hear what Stanley Kubrick would say on that point.
Yeah, I think it was just like all this ghosts that are like basically trapped by the hotel are just coming back and they're, you know, I don't know, just causing chaos. Cause yeah, they were just fucking around and just like, hey, I'm spooky, or look at this weird thing I'm doing.
Yeah.
And poor Wendy is just not having a good time.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was weird. That's definitely the weirdest part of the movie.
Really strange. I feel like, no offense to the genius of Stanley Kubrick, I know he is critically acclaimed with all his stuff.
He's trash.
Okay, great.
I can rip on him.
Okay, great.
He's not a good person.
Oh, he's not? All right. Amazing. No. I don't know anything about him. So I feel like it had the potential to go one step farther. I really appreciate good Easter eggs. And maybe this is something that's more modern in films. But I think he could have built up this underlying suspicion of Jack more and this whole 1920s storyline. Because we only get that starting in about like halfway, if not a little later in the movie. And then there's just only like subtle moments here and there. So it just kind of feels sprinkled in almost like an afterthought. And I think if they had played that up a little bit more from the beginning, it would have pushed the ideas that he was trying to get out there a little bit more. Because I think he was trying to, at least what was said, he was trying to give the idea that Jack is sort of a reincarnation of a former caretaker that was there. Not the most recent one, but from the past. Right. And I think that there is a lot of character acting that's happening. Jack Nicholson is doing a lot of work silently without, just his facial expressions, things like that. But I think it could have been a little bit more heavy-handed in the hinting towards those ideas instead of at the end it feeling all of a sudden like this random little flash. And there was stuff that they were doing, him talking to the bartender, things like that. I would have just liked to have seen like a more gradual like trickling in of it than what we had.
I don't know. So a lot of what Stanley did is pretty different from the book. He had his own vision for this. And Stephen King really was not a fan of this at all. That's why he ended up doing like the miniseries and says that's the accurate adaptation to the book. So I think Stanley Kubrick had just ideas and just kind of threw them in. And there's some things where it's like hard to explain. I think that's why a lot of people are interested in this movie, because there's so much you can think about and consider. But the one thing I saw, which I think is probably what's going on, or at least what I think is what you said with the reincarnation. So it seems like Grady and Jack are the caretakers and they alternate. So the one video I saw pretty much says that Jack gets reincarnated, goes to the hotel, everything happens, it jumps. Then after he dies, Grady is the next one that comes, because they're about like 10 years apart. So it's like a constant, they're both just constantly trapped there. And with, like you said, with Jack saying that it's like strong deja vu entering the hotel, he feels like he's been here before. That's what it just seems like. It's just a recurring, like they're just constantly in this loophole with the hotel, because the hotel is basically hell. It's just, Stephen King wrote, the book, because at the hotel he saw like two nuns leaving and was like, oh, the idea of like a godless hotel. So
okay.
where it kind of comes from.
Interesting.
Yeah. But I don't know if the photo thing is in the book.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's in
Oh,
there.
I will say this that I read about what the ending of the book was. Did you read about
Okay.
what the ending of the book was?
I know that you can say it. I'm pretty sure it's what I know because I never read the book. I'm not
Right.
interested.
So
But
what I read, what I read online was that essentially in the book, Jack overcomes the possession of the hotel long enough to tell Danny to escape and to help save Wendy and Danny before he ultimately dies in a boiler explosion that takes the hotel down with him.
mhm,
I prefer that ending. I feel
yeah.
like the reason why is because probably because I don't really like being left to guess what it is that happened. There's a little bit less ambiguity there. It's very
Yeah.
obvious. Okay, it was a possession, and he's not actually a bad guy. It's just well, maybe
Mhm.
he is not a good guy, but he isn't actually off his rocker because you're watching this movie and you're like, is this man just slowly becoming unhinged because he's alone in the hotel? But
Yeah.
the idea that it's the hotel itself that's the villain,
Mhm.
I like that better. I
Yeah.
find that more interesting.
Yes. So Stephen King, one thing he didn't like was that Jack's character in the movie just already seemed kind of scummy, right? Like
Yes.
you meet him, you're like, okay, like he doesn't seem like a good guy already.
Yeah.
And it just escalates. Whereas in the book, he is genuinely like trying to do better and is working on his alcoholism
Mhm.
and then gets stuck, possessed horribly and then manages to pull back and
Yeah.
everyone escapes. So that was one thing Stephen King didn't like. And I could see that. I
Yeah.
think Jack Nicholson killed this role.
Oh,
He was
yeah.
really fantastic. Um, but yeah, he just came off as kind of like you just didn't trust him
No, from the
like
very beginning,
immediately.
he gives
Yeah.
us like this kind of scummy vibe. And
Yeah.
Travis kept making comments about what a weird face Jack Nicholson has because he looks angry all the time with his eyebrows are very
Oh, his
expressive.
eyebrows.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He says a lot with his face. And it's really good for this character acting
Right.
aspect of it. But I think that like it does kind of make you question him. And it is something that I want to go back to where this whole movie you're kind of going back and forth between is Jack actually a bad person or is he
Mm.
just like kind of strange? Like you don't know if he's just, an 80s dad.
Yeah.
And so the dislocating the shoulder thing, I think that is genuinely ambiguous because that is something that
Right.
happens like pretty easily. I dislocated my sister's shoulder because I played with her too hard when I was a kid.
Mhm.
And that was like genuinely an accident. And
Yeah.
I know that my brother accidentally had his collarbone dislocated. No, his shoulder dislocated when he was little. Kids, they are like they're more fragile than
Yeah.
we give
Right.
them credit for, and that like dislocation of shoulder isn't something that's uncommon. And so it's
Yeah.
definitely possible that that could happen in a non-abusive scenario. But the
Yeah.
way it's portrayed, Wendy is sharing it like it happened because he was drunk and being
Mhm.
aggressive, which makes you go, okay. And then
Right.
the way she's telling it, she's kind of like has this weird smile on, like maybe she's being manipulated.
Right.
And then finding out that he's promising to be sober and this happened 3 years ago and he's only been sober
Yeah.
5 months and he told her to leave him if he wasn't sober anymore. That was just kind of strange to me. Sobriety is not linear. There's always
Yeah. Mm.
issues with coming back from that. But it makes me also question Wendy, where I know she's technically like the good guy in this, but
Mhm.
I did have red flags for her. First of all, she's reading Catcher in the Rye when we see her. And right off the bat, I was like, lady, come on. I know it's the 80s, but she's smoking in the kitchen right next to her kid.
Yeah.
She just like doesn't look like, she just looks kind of like fragile. She looks fragile and small, and I think that that's on purpose.
Yeah. Stanley had a vision for her because
Mhm.
she's definitely different in the book. In the book, she's basically described as a blonde
Oh.
used to be a cheerleader type of gal and has never had anything bad happen to her in her life. So then going to this hotel really
Oh, interesting.
fucked shit up. Whereas Shelley Duvall's Wendy is very opposite, and like you said, seems very fragile. Like she's really been through it. She just looks distraught a lot of the
Yes.
times, and I guess Stanley really wanted that type of vision for her.
Yeah.
But yeah, Stephen King once again was like, I don't like this
Yeah.
pick. Even though she did a great job, everyone said she did a great job.
Yeah.
It's just different character. He just didn't envision someone like that for Wendy.
Yeah. I understand that.
Speaking of Shelley Duvall, so the thing with Stanley Kubrick is that he's a perfectionist and he likes to redo scenes
Oh.
a lot. So Jack Nicholson and Shelley Duvall have expressed open resentment against the reception of the film.
Oh.
Because a lot of people credit Stanley Kubrick for it, whereas, they don't, the actors, crew, and Stephen King's material don't get enough credit for, which I think is very fair. I think Nicholson and Duvall really fucking carried the movie. So Nicholson considers Duvall's performance the most difficult role he's ever seen an actress take on. And she's also said it was like the hardest performance of her life. So the part of that is all the retakes. She suffered a nervous exhaustion throughout filming.
Wow.
Including physical illness and hair loss.
Ah.
The shot of the tennis ball rolling into Danny's toys took 50 takes to get right. So Stanley Kubrick was like really, I don't know, intimidating and demanding, especially to Shelley. And I don't know if part of it is because he wanted her to feel that isolation, where he'd like have the crew kind of isolate her too.
Oh, I
so she was just in this stress from that, and then also the stress of just doing this movie.
Yeah.
He would just like push her to her limits, and even though he says like she did a great job on it, like later he basically treated her like shit, which is really awful.
That is.
The scene where she's swinging the bat and going up the steps, according to the Guinness Book of Records, they said it was shot 127 times. But the Steadicam operator and editor said that it was actually shot about 35 to 45 times, which is still a lot.
Still a lot.
But can you imagine like that? She must have been actually exhausted swinging that bat.
Sounds exhausting. No wonder her arms were like kind of limp. She couldn't swing anymore.
She couldn't. It was too much. So luckily, the young actor for Danny was very well taken care of by Stanley Kubrick. He was very protective of him.
Good.
So much so that the actor thought the movie was a drama. He didn't even know it was a horror movie because I guess certain scenes, they wouldn't have him interacting with a lot of horror things.
Oh, good.
And even the scene of Wendy carrying Danny out and shouting at Jack for hitting him, it was a dummy. It wasn't actually the case.
Wow.
So, yeah.
Interesting. Okay, that's good. I do appreciate that.
I'm like, okay, so a child had an actually decent experience on a horror movie.
Yeah.
But yeah, he said that he didn't know until several years later.
Wow.
Pretty wild, yeah.
That's interesting. I did find it, that was another moment where I felt very sad watching the chasing scene, because it's a horrifying. This is a little boy being chased by his dad.
Yeah.
And you don't know this about me. This is gonna sound like I was chased, but I wasn't chased. But I actually know somebody whose father chased him with a knife to try to kill him, and he escaped when he was 3. So
3.
Yeah. So it's like, it's just like I was all of a sudden transported to like what that would be like, and I was like, oh my god, that's really horrible. Like, that's horrible.
Yeah.
I think if I didn't have like that experience, maybe I would have just been like, oh, whatever, watching it. But I was like, oh wow, that's scary. Like, that's actually very scary.
Yeah, I mean, you're in like a hedge maze.
Yeah.
And you're running around. It's a labyrinth. You could run into a dead end, and your father's chasing you with an axe. And Danny was smart enough to think to retrace his footsteps. I would not have thought of that.
Yeah.
So good on him for thinking on that and pretty much tricking his dad and killing him. But yeah, that whole, even like witnessing the death of the chef.
Yeah.
And hiding from his dad, that whole thing, like the idea of just trying to hide from someone trying to kill you is
It's
just
so
awful.
scary. So
Yeah.
scary. Like, the idea of anyone, like, coming after you to kill you is, I mean, I would not like that.
No. Nope.
Not
Not a fan of
interested.
that.
Mm-mm.
Yeah, I think the scariness of this movie comes from that like isolation idea. Like
Yeah.
for me, the scariest moments are when Danny's riding a tricycle
Mm.
and you just see the camera behind him and he's turning corners and like me
Okay.
knowing what's eventually gonna come creeps me out.
Yeah.
And also the scene of the chef Hallahan, right?
Mhm.
Walking in and it's just quiet. He's calling to see if anyone's there, and then
Oh.
Jack comes up from the side because I know what's gonna happen, and it's just
Yeah.
like for me, I'm like, oh,
Yeah.
it's so creepy.
Yeah, that's fair. And my deleted scene was the chef dying because I feel like
Yeah,
he deserved better. His whole purpose in the film was just like a narrative device to tell the story where they're like,
Right.
okay, now there's gonna be this man who explains The Shining, and now
Yeah.
we're gonna need some way for them to escape the hotel, so he's gonna bring a vehicle to them. And
in the book, he does survive.
okay,
Yeah, he does
prefer-
survive and manage to escape. And I was like, I would have preferred that because
Yeah.
I feel bad. I was like, he's trying to help. He
right,
flew from Florida to
yes.
Colorado to help. Like that's so
Right.
nice of him.
Right, exactly.
Shame.
It really is. Let's talk about Jack's red flags, and then we can touch on any points that I might have missed.
Okay.
So Jack was a former school teacher, and they never go into why he's no longer a school teacher.
He, I think, was drunk and got fired.
Oh.
He had like a angry burst or something like that.
Oh, that's unhealthy.
Yeah.
Oh, Jack. Okay. In the beginning of the movie, Danny says that he's hungry, and Jack says, "You should have eaten your breakfast," which I know is probably like a parent being frustrated, but I was like, that's not nice. And then Jack tells Danny about the Donner Party, which feels not fully appropriate for a child of that age to learn about cannibalism. I feel like there's better things. He decides not to go on a walk with his wife and instead to write, and then instead of writing plays with a ball, and then ironically
Right.
even when he was writing, he wasn't writing anything actually. He's throwing this ball around the hotel like he's not in charge of maintaining it. He could have broken a chandelier at any point in
Right.
time. By the end, he was being such a jerk that it wasn't worth writing down everything he was being a jerk about.
Right. Yeah, no,
Yeah.
he was pretty much an asshole the whole way through. I
Right.
don't think there was one thing he did that I was like, oh, maybe
No.
he is a nice person.
No.
No.
No, I know that, like, I could see there were some moments, and this I think could have been played up a little bit more. They could have played, well, this is, I don't know. It's just, if they're going with this idea of him being a manipulative, you're not really sure if he's a good guy, bad guy situation, then they could have played more into that and have him be more manipulative earlier on throughout. Because I think they didn't really show the relationship between Wendy and Jack that much. They showed it a little bit, and some of that progressively getting worse. I think the only time where I found him to be sort of loving to her was when he was gaslighting her into thinking there was nothing in room 237. And that was the nicest he was to her in the whole movie.
Yeah. And that weird conversation he had with Danny, he was like, I'd never hurt you and your mom.
Right.
And like at that point, it's like, is he kind of possessed? Is he
Right.
genuine? Because
Right.
Jack Nicholson's face is just,
Yes.
he's got those eyebrows up. And I'm like, I don't know if
I
I
know,
trust
dude.
you.
I know. He's like the original eyebrows.
Yes.
So I don't know.
I think that maybe that's what Stanley, Stephen King didn't like, because
Yeah.
for him that character is a good guy. He has his troubles, his issues. He's not perfect, but he's trying, and then gets sucked into this craziness.
This was Stephen King's first book that got turned into a movie, right?
I think that was Carrie.
Carrie. Okay.
Yeah, this was probably soon after though,
Because I was thinking that would be explaining why he let Kubrick do so many changes.
I think it was one of the first ones. I think this might have been after Carrie, because Carrie was 76. Okay. So
Yeah.
a few years.
Yeah, it was
I know.
Carrie, and then it was Salem's Lot.
Okay. Stanley Kubrick had like rights to this adaptation. So for King to do the miniseries, he had to get like permission, like a contract signed, which is
That's
crazy. I'm like, that's your
wild.
own story. So it was definitely early on where I think he
Yeah.
was just getting popular and wasn't really,
In
I
the
don't know,
know.
sure on how things
Yes.
worked.
Yeah.
Yeah. And Stanley Kubrick took full advantage, which
It's
is
the
unfortunate.
anything with like a young artist where you're,
Right.
you know, you don't have the know-how.
No, and it's. I mean, I do like this version. I don't like Stanley Kubrick, but I think it was a cool adaptation. But it does make me upset that he just didn't give a shit about Stephen King.
Yeah,
I'm like,
that's
dude,
sad.
you're like make your own movie then. Like, don't
Right.
take someone's work and kind of just
Right.
pick little things that you like and say fuck all to everything
Right.
else.
Exactly.
We can talk about Tony real quick because there's a really interesting
Tell me
tidbit
about
Tony.
Yeah, tell me about Tony the lizard.
The lizard. So Tony, do you want to guess who Tony is?
Ooh. I was wondering, by any chance, did they mention Tony's name at all in the movie aside from in reference?
I don't think so.
Okay.
I don't think there's any way for you to actually know who Tony
Okay.
is in the movie.
Okay, I would think that maybe Tony was in some way connected to the hotel as not the caretaker, but something similar.
So
Okay.
Tony is actually Danny from the future.
Whoa!
Danny's middle name is Anthony, short for Tony, and you don't know that unless you read the book or watched the miniseries. But it's pretty much his future self kind of warning him and sending him visions
Wow.
of what was going to happen at the hotel. So Tony isn't bad, even though he seems a little creepy,
Right.
and but he was trying to protect
Yeah.
self, basically.
Yeah. I did feel like Tony, at first I was suspicious of Tony, but then I figured it was more of a protective energy around him.
Yeah.
Especially because he sort of reverted to just being Tony during the most traumatic elements of
Right.
it. So it was definitely a defense mechanism on his part. That's really
Right.
interesting. I was not expecting that.
Yeah, there is a second book and a movie called Doctor Sleep.
Okay.
So if anyone does not know Doctor Sleep, you can watch it. It's pretty good. It continues off the movie, and it's Danny when he's an adult who's also suffering from alcoholism,
Oh.
which makes people wonder if Jack also had The Shining and was
That's what
drinking.
I did wonder
kind
if
of-
he had The Shining when he was seeing Lloyd and things like that. I
Yeah.
was like, maybe that's where it comes from. And, you know, it would explain why he becomes possessed by these
Mhm.
visions and things like
Yeah.
that.
It's a very popular theory, which I think I could believe because the spirits seem to want this psychic ability that Danny
Yeah.
has. And if Jack has it too, that could be why they're kind of going after him. But Danny is very powerful, and they go more into that in Doctor Sleep if you're curious.
Yeah.
But yeah, pretty much spirits are just going after him forever. So he gets into
Aw.
drinking. Poor Danny.
Aw, poor bud.
Yeah. Poor bud. I think I ripped on Kubrick enough.
Okay.
Oh, I can bring up the elevator scene.
Yeah. The blood elevator.
So-
I'm very familiar with the gif of the blood elevator.
Yeah, so it was a difficult shot, obviously, to do. It took 9 days to set up,
Oh my
and
god.
they had to do it 3 times. So imagine all that work.
And then cleaning it up to film it again.
Yep.
Oh my
And every
God.
time Kubrick would say it doesn't look like blood, and it took approximately a year to actually get it right
No
the way he wanted it, because that's how
way.
much of a psycho he is. So-
Wow, that's insane.
So you can imagine, you don't know how the blood's gonna or not blood, but it's gonna
Yeah.
flow out the liquid.
Yeah.
It could look too. I forget what they used for blood, but if it looks too thin or
Right.
it's not, doesn't have the right consistency, I could see him being a little bitch about it. So.
Yeah. Yeah, there was a lot of
Yeah.
iconic scenes in this. A lot of stuff that I didn't realize was The Shining, and then things that were
Mhm.
nice to have explained and know. Okay, that's where Here's
Yeah.
Johnny comes from, and that's why it's such.
You're fully cultured.
Yeah, exactly.
I think I remember. I want to say it was the Rugrats that had a connection to Danny
No.
riding the tricycle and going around the corner. I think that was in the
Oh.
Rugrats, but
I'm not
obviously
surprised. Yeah.
comical. But There was a kids show, I think it was the Rugrats that
I
had
could see
that
that.
callback.
Yeah, I could
Pretty
see
funny.
that for sure. I passed on main character and villain, obviously.
Fair.
If he had been a good guy, I could have said, I kept trying to like see him as a normal person and be like, how does Wendy see him? Like, where's the
Right.
attractive young Jack Nicholson? But all I could see were angry eyebrows, and I got scared.
I just feel like it's hard to see Jack Nicholson as a good. That's mean, but like,
No, I know.
he just always has this look about him.
Yes.
I just can't picture him.
I know.
being-
I tried to find romances with him because I was like, it'd be kind of fun to give you a romance with him. And there is a romance he's in, but I haven't seen it. And it's him as an older person, and I just can't. He just has this wicked look about him. He just doesn't give this vibe of like a cutesy, romancy person. I said my survival rating. At first I almost put 10, and then I was like, Megan, calm
Okay.
down. Don't be so confident. So I reined it down. I said 8.5 because at the end of the day, like if I think about, I am probably somewhat easy to overpower. If I wasn't thinking with my brains, or if I was in any freezing moment, I could see it being challenging. So I give myself 8.5. I feel like I have a pretty good chance of survival. What would you give yourself?
I think Jack was just kind of like a bumbling idiot most of the time. There was enough space. Yeah, it was scary because you don't know where he's at because of how big the hotel is.
Yeah.
But I think there's enough space where you can grab a weapon and hide or slowly make your way through. I definitely would have knocked his ass out pretty early on, though.
Yeah.
I probably would have killed him with the bat.
Yeah.
I don't think I would have just knocked him out.
Yeah.
Wendy was nice for that. I probably would have killed him. So.
I think I would have locked him in the pantry too, but I would have thrown a bunch of things in front of it. I don't know how Grady opened it. That's a mystery I'll never. Did that go? Any of your theories cover that?
No, the only thing is that the warning that the chef gives to Danny about 237 is because this whole time Danny's never been like attacked by ghosts or hit by ghosts, and in that room the woman attacks him. So the ghosts here are very strong, and I think they just can do things. They can actually harm you.
Yeah.
So I think Grady was just able to unlock it because that's just how it is. So
yeah, I don't understand why the chef was never attacked by any of these spirits.
I don't know. I don't think he's as strong as Danny, but also he probably isn't like alone a lot of times. He's working when the hotel is active.
Yeah,
so.
that's true. I said I would recommend it to a non-horror fan. It didn't give major horror vibes. I wouldn't give it to somebody who is easily icked out because there are a couple of gory scenes, but it's also nothing like actively.
It's really not too bad.
No. And so my overall rating was 4.25.
Okay.
Yeah, definitely some things I would have liked to have seen different, but I like a classic. It was, it was good acting, and it kept me thinking.
Cool. I'm glad you liked it.
Yeah.
I wasn't sure how you were going to like it. I was like, Megan's either going to really dislike this movie or like it because there's so much to kind of think about.
Yeah.
So I'm happy you enjoyed it.
I like a good thing that you have to think about.
Finally, a Stephen King that you enjoy.
I know. You're not the only one.
Who
would have
thought? But it's not. It's like barely based off of his shit.
I was just gonna say it's like barely King.
Barely doesn't count.
Oh God. All right. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
So I'm gonna have you watch The 100-Foot Journey. You haven't seen it.
Heard
okay.
This. I don't think I've ever heard of this movie.
I saw this in theaters with my papa. It was released in 2014, so it's 10 years old now.
Wow, okay.
So basically, this is about a family from India who moves to France and decides to set up a restaurant across the street from a Michelin star restaurant.
Okay.
And it's about the challenges of moving, being, culture shock and changing from one country to another. It's about enemies to lovers.
Okay, I'm in.
It's about starting off disliking each other and then finding mutual things in common.
Okay.
I remember being skeptical going into it and then leaving and feeling very warm-hearted, essentially.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've never heard about it.
Yeah.
So it looks.
I
Sounds like it'd be
haven't seen
cute.
it for 10 years, so I have to rewatch it. But I'm hoping that I enjoy it as much as I remember having enjoyed it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now I'm excited.
Yeah.
I'll have to figure out what the threat is. I
Yeah.
hope it's a axe wielding murderer.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Probably not.
Yeah. In this one, I think you're gonna get it pretty quickly.
Okay.
All right.
Well, thank you everyone for listening.
Thanks. Bye.
You can find us on.
I'm sorry. Yeah, you go.
It doesn't even matter anymore. You can find us online if you don't know already. How do you watch this? Instagram or Gmail? How do you watch this?
Yep.
TikTok? How do you watch?
Yep.
So,
Okay.
anyway,
Bye.
bye.